Hi, I'm Emmy with Ebb and Flow Creative Co. Today we're going to be painting this easy watercolor sunset. I'm using the Cotman Travel palette because I feel like it's a pretty good set for beginners and it's pretty easy to come by. So we're going to start off by painting about the top 2/3 of it with the yellow. I'm using the darker, warmer yellow and adding water to the top of the paper. Now I'm adding the cadmium red to the top and blending it out with water. If you're noticing any lines, go back with your brush and smooth it out a little. And we're just kind of going to blend those two colors together with water to meet in the middle. And anywhere that's too dark, I'm going back and smoothing it out. And I added some of the cooler red to the top too, just at that very top bit. So now I'm removing some of the yellow to create the sun. You can just dip it with a paper towel, get it a little bit wet, dip it with a paper towel, and remove that color. Next, we're adding in some blue at the bottom and around the edges for the water. Be careful when you're getting closer to that yellow line because it will bleed. The blue I used is the ultramarine blue. If you add too much, just remove it with a napkin. And if it starts bleeding, you can remove the paint from bleeding too. So we're gonna just add a little more color to the top, mixing up some orange. And now we're adding in some of the cool red for clouds. And they're bleeding, but we're going to go back and fix all that. This is just the first layer. So next we're adding in yellow where the sun would be shining and leaving a reflection on the water. So we let that dry and then we come back and add the second layer. We're going to add a darker line right at the horizon. And then we're adding some darker yellow. Looks like I'm using yellow ochre around the sun to give it some depth and make it pop out a little more. We're gonna go back to those harsh blue lines on the water here in a minute. And that's the beauty of watercolor, is that if your lines are too harsh, even if they dry a bit, you can smooth them out. I'm just really smoothing out that dark yellow to make it blend with the background and just make the sun pop out just a little bit. It creates a little bit of a shadow behind it. And now I'm adding in some more red to the clouds, kind of making those lines a little less ugly. They bled and got a little funky, so this adds a nicer edge. And we're going to add some cadmium. It's nice to add lots of different colors into one thing because it gives it more dimension. Oh, and it's bleeding, so I have to blot it and remove it. I'm never really too careful about the bleeding because I know I can remove it, and sometimes it creates accidental spots of blending in a nice way. So I usually paint pretty fast and fix it as I go. And so now I'm adding more blue to the water with kind of stripes, but you don't want just straight lines. They need to have a little bit of wave to them and a little bit of wonkiness, and we don't want that harsh edge along the side. And we're going to blend it into the yellow part in the middle. Add a little bit to the clouds. I added some purple to the clouds earlier to give them some dark spots. And we're going to add some lines to create waves. And if you feel like they're too harsh at the end, you can soften them. And I'm making that yellow part a little bit brighter to really make that sun pop out. And then blending it out with the next layer. I'm adding some more of the cool red to the top. And some more of the cadmium red. It's a warm red. It's almost orange. I'm just adding a little more dimension to the clouds. You want some light spots and dark spots, lighter spots at the top and darker spots at the bottom. And so now I'm adding more of the waves to the water. Now that the blue has dried a bit, we can add some that overlap the blue and the yellow. And watercolor is translucent, so it does create a little bit of a green look, but I think it looks pretty nice. And now, yeah, we're just adding more to the water and smoothing it out because it's a little too stripey. And you just want them a little more subtle, or they can be stripey. It's up to you. We're adding some more dark lines to the horizon. And the darker the water is, or the farther away the water is, the darker it should be. So now I'm adding some more, and you can see this time there's a lot more waves to the lines. And I'm going through and making smaller ones. Just adding some more layers to the clouds. I'm adding just the tiniest little bit of yellow just to show the reflection from the sun onto the clouds. It's like the sun's shining through them. And so now we're adding some red to the water, and it's the cadmium red. And just little bitty waves, little reflections of the sky. Now I'm just smoothing them out a bit with a wet brush. And I like to add details with a very small brush. I think that's a round number 2. I'm just smoothing out that bit of yellow. And so I'm mixing the darkest brown with the ultramarine blue. It's the kind of darker warm blue to make a gray color. And this is good for adding some darker waves. It's a nice cool blue, or cool gray. And now I'm adding in just little bits of land with that darker gray. And just kind of dabbing my brush to make it look like there's trees growing on the little bit of land. And making sure that it's dry over there. I'm going to add a little more to the other side. It's a watery mix, so I'm going to have to add another layer. And so to get it thicker, you mix up a fresh batch. Try to keep it pretty light on the water when you're mixing it, and then you'll get a little bit darker of a color. Or you could just use pre-mixed Payne's gray. I don't know that I would use black. Black's a little too harsh, and I try not to use black at all when I'm painting. This kit doesn't have a black or a gray. It comes with a white for some reason, but you can make a gray easily enough. Just adding in more waves and details. The layers are really what makes a painting look better. When you first start out, it's going to look pretty unfinished, but just keep adding layers, letting them dry in between, and work until you're happy. And as the watercolor builds upon itself, it creates like darker and more interesting colors. That's the importance of using watercolor paper. And for this, I'm just using the Arteza watercolor paper, but it holds up pretty well to all the water. It's taped because I'm using a lot of layers and a lot of water. And taping it down will keep it from buckling. Alright, and then you remove the tape when you're finished. kind of the most satisfying part. And that's how to paint an easy watercolor sunset. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications.